And I think it's already finally happened. I'm all back in the Eastern time zone. Well, at least most of me, I guess. Got a real wonderful text message, whatever it was, the other day from one of the people that was on the tour. It's their first time to go to Israel. And she sent me something that said about her process of coming back. And she lives in California, wonderful young lady. And she said, you guys were talking about an emptiness that you feel when you leave Israel. She said, now that she was back from Israel, she said, I feel that, I understand that. And it's something that I need to make a mental note to myself, I guess. People I've talked to through the years that have taken trips to Israel, it's like, and it's not, I mean, I guess it's a little bit about going anywhere on a vacation, or, you know, you're just traveling for some reason. You're going there and you have the adrenaline and the anticipation and all of those things, and then you come back and it seems like it takes longer to get over a trip than it does when you get there and, you know, the processing of the jet lag. But with Israel is something just a little different than that, because you do feel an emptiness, almost I find myself, and again, I'm going to make a mental note of this, that when you come back from Israel, there's almost a depression that tries to set in. But we understand that, you know, I'm coming back. People say, well, you know, welcome home. And I understand that. You know, people will post, you know, I'm glad you had a safe trip. Well, I never really felt unsafe there. It was not until I got back to Atlanta that I felt unsafe. You know, welcome home. I understand that, but this is to me exile. You know, that is home. So, and if you've never been, I know it's difficult to process that, but I think if we're anyone that's really seeking the covenant, I think it makes perfectly good sense. So with that, let's go to the book of Bereshit. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 25, starting in verse 19 with the Torah portion, Toldot, or history, as David Stern would choose to translate this word. King James translated generations. Both of those words are perfectly fine. But it has a little bit of a different connotation when you start to look at it. I challenge you. I'm not going to go into it in this recording, but the word is fascinating. When we look at it as Toldot, you see that there is a tav at the beginning and a tav at the end. So this is the tav, of course, is the Hebrew letter which points us to the mark, the stake, or the covenant. So to have a word that has a tav at the beginning and the end, you can fill in the blanks and maybe look up that word and spend a little bit of time meditating on it yourself. But the word also has, if we kind of look back into it a little bit, it is also about travail. Is that not a perfect word regarding what life is to begin with? It has a beginning. It has an end. I talked with Life on Purpose last night. We were, myself, Daniel, Ryan, and David, we were talking about the last of the 5 questions of life. Those 5 questions of who are you? Where did you come from? What have you been given? What will you do with it? And number 5 is, what will be the results of the first 4 questions? I challenge you to go and listen to it. These guys are doing an amazing job on this podcast. So much just pure, raw life experience, life instruction that is coming out in these episodes. So this word travail, that going from the beginning to the end. Life is not as I've said, this is not new for me. It's something I heard many years ago, that life is not a playground. Life is a battleground. And the battle is on. And we're going to see that battle as it's going to come out in this Torah portion. A battle over the very life, soul, essence of your being. It's what life is about. So we see this, that Here is Isaac. He's 40 years old. There, when he took Rivka, the daughter of Bethuel, of course, the relative of Laban, which we're going to see at the end of the Torah portion. But he's 40, so let's kind of figure this thing out. How old was he when he went to Mount Moriah with his father, Abraham? Well, he was probably somewhere in his early to mid 30s. Many have thought that he would have been the same age as Yeshua at the end of his life of 33. I can see that. And so this is we see that he prayed because it has been, 5 years or so? How long is it that he began to pray? He figured out, wait a minute, something's wrong here. And what is wrong is called barrenness. So he sought abundance. And the word there for prayed is different than the word that we saw last week of he went out into the field and was meditating. Now, both of these words of meditate and prayer end up being about covenant. So this letter Tav, if I was to pick out of the Hebrew Aleph Bet, the letter with the most meaning to us, it would be the Tav. If I was to say, and I have said this, that if there's one word besides the word, I guess, relationship, but it all comes back to the word covenant. And this is probably why there is this battle in people's minds that has been brought forth regarding the translators and those that deemed the terminology that many would use, but I challenge you to get free of, and that is Old Testament, New Testament. The word testament is so far away from truth that I personally don't even use it at all, unless I have to say to somebody, and then I'll explain that it's not about testament. It's about a covenant, because the difference between testament and covenant is life. A testament is, if you have your last will and testament, it's only good when you die. It's irrelevant. It's an empty piece of paper with some kind of promises that can change at any moment. Okay, you can give a will and testament to your children, your grandchildren, and leave them all your fortunes, and then find out that your fortunes were in Bitcoin. where did it go? In the end, they got nothing. It was a blank piece of paper that was, in the end, just empty of anything that could be passed on from generation to generation. But see, the word covenant is about something between living people. It's a promise that's based upon the life of the person. And this is where we go back to Abraham and the covenant that was cut, and how Yah walked between the covenant himself. Abraham was over there sleeping, and Yah is saying, I got this. I got the whole thing. I got my part. I got your part. I got our part. So here is where covenant comes in. And the word taldot points us to covenant. The word from last week of he was out in the field meditating. He was, I think I could make a pretty good argument. He was meditating on the covenant. And here comes the answer to that meditation, as Rivka, as she is, she gets off her camel. We see the wedding, all these things. But then, wait a minute. Just like with Dad here, if we don't have children, the covenant's ending. Because, Dad didn't live quite as long as Noah. And Noah didn't live quite as long as Methuselah. And so we need to have something happen. I can't wait till I'm 99 years old. So he began to pray. What part of that? Where at? I don't know exactly. We will see as we turn the page that Isaac was 60 years old when the children were born. So this is a 20-year period, 19 of which, 19 years and 3 months of barrenness. Now, there's some interesting things there about the number 19 and how it actually points us to responsibility in the covenant. I don't really have time to go into that, but just give you a little teaser there. You can study that on yourself. So he was, the word he prayed literally means that he sought abundance. Now, what's fascinating is because it says that she was barren. The root word for barrenness, yes, it can mean barren or sterile in a reproductive sense. But if we back out that to more of the root word here, it literally means that she was plucked up or rooted up. So she was like a fruit tree that had not brought forth fruit and was about to be plucked up. Consider that in light of what the Torah says regarding the number of years that you're not to take to yourself the fruit, and then consider that regarding the parable that Yeshua taught of a fruit tree that has not produced fruit, and at some point in time it was about to be plucked up and thrown into the fire because it couldn't produce fruit, which meant it couldn't produce seed. Remember that the purpose of fruit is not fruit. The purpose of fruit is seed. So fruit is what we enjoy in the process of seed becoming seed. We enjoy the fruit. So for Isaac, the enjoyment of fruit is going to be Jacob and Esau. As that fruit, as that seed has produced fruit, which then will produce seed, and that seed will be either for or against the covenant, as we will see in those two boys. So she was about to be, in his mind, plucked up, so he sought abundantly. Now, I have a note in my scripture here of kind of my own personal thoughts regarding this this word is that he dug through. He saw some things and he had to dig through. And that's going to come into play a little bit farther in this Torah portion. So his prayer is answered. Yes, we do see that. But the answered prayer places his wife in the midst of the battle for the covenant. Consider, maybe you've seen this, maybe you haven't, but answered prayer does not always make things easier. I've had times in my life that I've prayed about something, and when you see the answer to it, you're like, wait a minute, I didn't quite see it being like this. You know, I thought that the prayer, the answer to my prayer was just going to make everything hunky-dory, whatever hunky and dory is. It's kind of one of those weird words to me, but it's just going to make everything fine. And then all of a sudden, that prayer puts you in the midst of extreme battles. Because, why? It's about the covenant. So the answered prayer is about covenant, and this is going to produce the answered prayer, which is going to produce two children, two fruits, which both contain seed. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the the parts of these accounts that are very familiar to all of us, of the boys fighting and all of these things. I'm going to kind of go past that when the boys come on the scene, they begin to grow up. And it says in verse, 25, 27, that, where is it? There it is. The boys grew, and Esau became a skillful hunter and outdoorsman, while Yaakov was a quiet man who stayed in the tents. Now, this has been likened to, wrongly I believe, that Esau was kind of this macho guy, and Isaac, on the other hand, was like the metro guy, the metro man. I tell you, being traveling this time, it is amazing to watch the feminization of males. It's just this process that is happening, and not only in the mannerisms, but it seems like physically this is happening. And this goes to some things that are prophesied in Scripture, I believe, of confusion, of chaos regarding the genders. So don't mean to go over to that point, but here we see that it says that that Esau was a skillful hunter. Now, if you look at the word hunter here, the first time that this word is used is regarding Nimrod. Nimrod became a skillful hunter, and it is some of the commentaries actually put forth this thought, that he was a hunter of man. That he was, and I'm not saying specifically that he was out, with his sniper bow hunting men, but he was trying to overcome them. He was setting himself up, such as the Nephilim, the men of renown, the men of empty words that were seeking to take power over people. Basically saying that, I am going to build my own kingdom. So here's the essence of these two men. One is, I think, wanting to build the kingdom of the covenant, whereas the other one is seeking to build his own kingdom. We see that that Jacob is a man of the tents. The word there for tent is actually a word that we see quite often when we go over to Exodus chapter 25 and we start talking about the tabernacle, the Mishkan. It is about the covering, which is the tent that was in the midst of the other tents. So we could look at this as, once again, saying that that Esau was about his own tent. He was about the freedom that he received just by, going out and conquering. Whereas it seems that Isaac was more concerned about the covenant and his seed producing good seed. Now, verse 33, of course, of the same chapter, 33, 34, is this account, and I want to go into it briefly today, that it's about how Christianity has said that Jacob, because he was the supplanter, he stole the birthright. Well, anyone that believes that he stole the birthright basically has not read the word, because there is nothing here that says that he stole it, but rather he bought it. He bought it for a pot of stew, which that pot of stew, if we go back to tradition, this is about the covenant. This is about I'm kind of leaning toward that this was a memorial of what would become Passover later on, a memorial of the covenant, a special meal regarding the covenant. So he sold the birthright. And it says that Esau showed how little he valued his birthright, or let's put in their inheritance. Let's put in the word that he showed little value for his inheritance. There are two things that we are told in Scripture that are our inheritance. One of those we've talked about numerous times in the book of Bereshit, and that is the land. There is an inheritance. Yah said to Abraham, I will give you this land as an inheritance to generations to come. So the land of Israel is part of our birthright, is part of our inheritance. The book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, will tell us that the Torah is our inheritance. So let's tie this in and look in the mirror a little bit and hopefully like what we see. Thus Esau showed little value for the land and for the instructions of life of the Torah, that which had been passed down through Noah, Shem, to Abram, to Isaac, and now is going to go to Jacob. The offer is to Jacob and to Esau, but Esau is showing little value for either. I have to ask a question. I'm not trying to point a finger at anyone specifically, but regarding this messianic Hebrew roots, restoration, let's put whatever you guys understand, whatever name you want to put on it. We're basically coming back to the same thing. How prevalent is the spirit of Esau within messianic Hebrew roots circles? If the standard for that covenant is a love, uncompromising love for the land and love for the Torah itself, how much of a spirit of compromise, of little value, is there rampant in Messianic Hebrew roots circles? For when a person, I see this all the time. When a person goes on a tour to Israel and they're going and supporting the Arab economy, they're staying in Arab-owned hotels, Esau-owned, Esau-owned bus companies, having a descendant of Esau, and this is not an anti-Arab statement, okay? There is every ability for anyone to come into the covenant, no matter what their genealogy is. The scripture in the renewed covenant says, whosoever will. And that includes everybody. You know, when you say whosoever, that pretty well is a blanket of whosoever. So this is not against, but I can tell you that we had three or four of our people in on the Connect to Israel tour that due to some health issues, they needed to go back to the hotel. They could not make the walk. It was just going to be too difficult for them to make the walk from the old city to the Lev Yerushalayim hotel. And, that happens. They got a cab in the old city. And today, most of the cabs, many of the cabs are being driven by Arabs, Muslims. They got in the cab and the guy told him 120 shekels. By the time they got out of the cab, he had raised it to 200. But he also spent the whole time telling them about the wonders of Islam, the wonders of being a Muslim. In the whole ride, it was just this diatribe of him trying to, he just belittled them the whole time. So this is not an anti-Arab statement. This is an anti-Esau statement. So those that would go to the land and say, well, if I stay in an Arab hotel, then I'm going to save this little bit of money here. And if I shop in the Arab section in the Muslim quarter, instead of going to the Makani market, I'm going to save just a little bit more. You're selling your birthright. You're holding your people that are doing that are holding their inheritance with little value. The same holds true that we're coming into December. Okay, we all know what that is. We all have this, this thing that we're going through, and you're going to have you're going to just have it. All right, I'm not going to go into the details. You know what it's like. Are you going to take a stand, or will you sell your birthright? Something for everybody to think about. Now, I'm going to go all the way down to chapter 26. Is that there is a famine. The Almighty comes specifically to Isaac and says, don't do what your father did. Stay here in the land. He starts to prosper. But the man it says this, okay, Isaac planted crops in the land and reaped that year 100 times as much as he had sowed. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had blessed him. The man became rich and prospered more and more until he had become very wealthy indeed. He had flocks, cattle, and large household, and the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped up and filled with dirt the wells his father's servant had dug during the lifetime of Abraham his father. Get the picture here that Isaac is a wealthy man. He's not living in poverty, okay? He has pretty much everything that is needed in life. He is one of the, the Fortune 500 people. He is in the top of the top regarding wealth. So he really doesn't need anything, but yet there is something that he needs, and that is the connection with his father. The connection is in the wells. It says he'd filled the wells his father's servant had dug during the lifetime of Abraham, his father. These wells are not necessarily about water. There are other sources. But these wells, though they're not about water, they are about water. In that Yeshua would say about the living water. That word, I think I could trace this back and work with this word and show us that the word water is about the covenant. It's about the blessings. We go to Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal. There's, I'm told, 14 freshwater springs that are coming forth on Mount Gerizim, the Mount of Blessing. There are 0 on Mount Ebal. So this is talking to us not only about a physical prosperity, but about a spiritual prosperity. Therein, we could look at some of the prosperity teachings that came out, going back into, I guess, about the 80s, specifically a number of people out of Tulsa, that were all talking about physical prosperity. But yet, they had not looked at the word of Deuteronomy, I believe it's chapter 8, verse 10, I will give you wealth, I will prosper you in order to establish my covenant, establish my Brit upon this land. So if the Father prospers us physically, it is about us then understanding that it's about, how do I word this one? If he prospers us in a physical sense, it is for the establishment of the spiritual. Let me try that one again. If he prospers us in the physical realm, he is doing so in order that we may help in the prospering of bringing the spiritual realm into the physical realm. It's not just about getting a new car. It's about being a part of, I don't want this to sound self-serving here, being a part of ministries, being a part of organizations, being a part of people's lives who are seeking to establish the covenant upon this earth. So financial blessing is not just about us. For Isaac, he saw that though he was prospering physically, there was something about these wells. They needed to go back and dig out the wells of his father. For those wells of his father was more about the spiritual blessing than the physical blessing. I hope I'm making some kind of sense there. Sometimes I get something that's kind of rolling around there, and I have a difficult time putting it into words. So, I pray that somewhere the Spirit can kind of mesh this thing together. So, the wording here is that they had filled with dirt all the wells his father's servants had dug during the lifetime of Abraham, his father. They had stopped up with debris, powder. These are all roots of this word: debris, powder, and mortar. It wasn't that they had just, the word there is, when it says they'd filled up with dirt, it's not the word eretz. It's not the word just for earth, but I kind of see it more as they had poured concrete in there. And so unstopping these wells was something of difficulty. It would have been much easier for them to dig a different well. The earth would have been easier to work with. But yet he needed to go back and to unstop the wells that would bring forth the living water that his father had drank. Now there's the key. He needed to drink of the same water of his forefathers. The water that Abraham had drank. He needed to drink. What is this restoration about? One aspect, we could look at it like this. The picture is that we want to drink of the same water that Abraham drank of. We want to drink of the same covenant, the same obedience, the same faith of a man who, though the message of Messiah was there to him, he did not understand how it would all manifest itself, but yet he continued to walk in it. Hebrews 11, he looked for a city whose builder and maker was Elohim. The man of faith, he drank of the waters of faith. He drank of the waters of trust. He drank of the waters of forgiveness when he failed. He drank of the waters of the covenant. And I think that what this movement, whatever you want to call it, is about, it should be about us drinking of the same waters. But let's face it, folks, denominations, non-denominations, religious systems have stopped up the wells of Abraham. Why did they Why did the Philistines stop up the wells of Abraham? I mean, that didn't make sense. It makes no sense for them to do that because they had to find their own wells. So they had to go dig a different well in order to get water. They could have just drank of that well, but it's about we don't want you drinking of Abraham's water. We want you drinking of our own water. This is the picture of religious systems today that keep us from drinking of the waters of life that Abraham drank from. But instead, drink from this water over here. Drink from my denomination. Drink from my synagogue. Drink from my teaching. Drink from this person's teaching. That person's teaching. No, it'd be too difficult to get back to Abraham. And once again, those that desire to drink from the waters that Abraham drank of, the faith, the trust, the obedience, the forgiveness, we will have to go back and dig. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we do this every week. This is why I teach this every week. This is why I do 4 programs plus teaching at Life Assembly, is because we're about digging out the wells to get back to the same water that Abraham drank of. Now, it says in verse 32 that they began to dig other wells, and then in verse 30, Yitzhak prepared a banquet for them, and they ate and drank. The next morning, they got up early and swore to each other. Then Yaakov sent them on their way, and they left him peacefully. I'm not going to go into the backstory there. That very day, Yitzhak's servants came and told him about the well they had dug. We have found water. And this is the city that is named Beersheba to this day. Drinking of Abraham's water should then propel us on to finding our own water source, our own well. It's not that we're departing from Abraham, but there's how do I put this? In every generation, there should be a renewed, not renewed. In every generation, there should be an expounding of the covenant. That word, I will establish, kum, I will establish my covenant in you, that was spoken to Noach, to Abraham, to Abram at the time, to Abraham. He's speaking it to Isaac, to Jacob, to the 12 tribes. He speaks it to David. He speaks it all through the scriptures, that I'm going to renew, I'm going to establish my covenant in you. I'm going to expound the revelation of my covenant. But it all goes back to the well of Abraham. When we drink of that well, then we have a foundation that we go to the next well. We find our own well, but the water of this well, let me just kind of throw something for you to meditate on. The water of the well that I dug must have the same flavor, must have the same taste, must have the same qualities as the water of Abraham. It can't be a different flavor. It has to be the same flavor. But now, it's like I've built on Abraham's wells, but I found my own well. I found my own revelation. I've gone through that time period that the God of Abraham becomes the God of Isaac. The God of Isaac becomes the God of Jacob. The God of my grandmother became my God. It's the same flavor of the well, of the water from the well going all the way back to Abraham, which I dare say is the same flavor of the water that's coming out of the river from the garden. because the flavor is the Messiah. So when he says, out of me will flow living water, that water that flows to us through Messiah has the same flavor, the same qualities as the river that flowed out of the Garden of Eden. I hope you can kind of work with that picture for a little bit. So we see in chapter 27 this whole thing of deceit. There's all kinds of commentaries on this. Was Isaac truly being deceitful since he had already purchased the birthright? Was his mother being deceitful? She probably knew that he had purchased the birthright. You know, there's a lot of speculation here. And I'm not one to, I think as you know, I'm not one to just point fingers at the failures of these people that walked this life out. Because I don't know where I would have been in. I don't know if I'd have done as good as they did. Probably not. But let's look at it a little different here. Is it possible that this whole chapter, this whole account of the so-called deception of Isaac or of Jacob to his father Isaac could have been changed? Didn't really need to happen? What if instead of the deceit, quote unquote deceit, what if instead Jacob would have gone into his father and said, Dad, I have a conversation. We need to have a conversation here. You're favoring my brother, but you need to know who my brother really is. And you need to know what he did, because I'm the one that made the stew of the covenant. And he sold it to me. He sold me the birthright. So Dad, I'm not standing here as Esau, the firstborn. I'm standing here as Isaac, the legal holder of the covenant, asking you for your blessing, the blessing of the firstborn. When we seek to deceive instead of confront, well, instead of confronting a situation, let's just kind of come up with a scheme in which everybody's going to be happy in the end. When's the last time that worked? When is the last time that compromise and deceit through compromise actually worked? Now, I have to tell you, in saying that, I'm not a confrontation person. I don't like confrontation. I will run as fast as I can from confrontation. I don't like it. I grew up in confrontation. I guess that's, that may be where that came from. I don't want to have anything to do with it. But I've come to the place of understanding that if I am committed to this covenant, then there are times that I'm going to be put in a place that I'm going to have to stand in confrontation with those that are seeking to destroy, to water down, that I must take a stand regarding it. What would have happened? What would have happened if, instead of the so-called deceit, if Isaac and Rivka had stood in front, or Jacob and Jacob and Rivka had stood in front of Isaac and told the truth? No. Hypothetical. Now we see that in the end, the truth comes out, as it always is going to, and that Esau is, it says he wept aloud, and this is verse 39, and Isaac his father answered him, Here, your home will be of the riches of the earth and of the dew of the heaven from above. Now, the wording here, I think, is a little different. It's totally different, actually. Your home will be away from the riches of the earth and away from the dew of the heaven from above. This is, Esau is, in my mind, speaking of what would become Islam, the Muslim nations of this world. If you look at a map, you look at a globe, and you go back into history a little bit, notice how things on this earth are changing. It's called global warming. No. What it's called is spiritual. You look at how, as Islam has spread through Europe, Islam has spread through the Middle East, Islam has spread through Africa. The lands in which Islam is spreading through, the lands of which Islam is spreading through, I don't know if I said that right, are becoming desert. Go back and look at it. And the desert of, and though there may be riches in oil in many of those places, are there really riches? Because they don't have the riches of the heavens. They don't have the riches of the covenant, which means you may own some riches of the land, but you'll never understand what to do with that riches. You will use it for yourself because you're a hunter in the shadow of Nimrod, looking for your own power and your own kingdom. Now, chapter 28 briefly is about Jacob being sent back to Laban. Laban, instead of standing in the land, there was the deceit, and now he's running. He's running away from the land of the inheritance. He's running away from the instructions of the covenant. It's kind of, I look at it like this. Laban, or Jacob is a picture of a people who have said, standing up for this Torah, standing up for this land of Israel is just too difficult. Standing up for the covenant is too difficult. I think we'll just go back to where we were. I'll just go back to Ur of the Chaldees. I'll just go back to the suburbs. I'll go back to remember the word Laban means white. I'll go back to the false holiness of exile instead of standing for the covenant, standing for the land, standing for the instructions given to me. I'll just compromise. And how would life go if, instead of running to Laban, Isaac, Jacob, Rivkah would have stood in the face of Esau and said, you're the one that's leaving. Shavua Tov, have a blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem, see you again next week. By the way, happy Thanksgiving, I forgot to say that. And my thought for the day always on Thanksgiving is this: the greatest thing about Thanksgiving is knowing who to thank. That we can be thankful for. Until next week, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.